Hello everyone, welcome to the Haunted Book Club podcast. We'll start off like we always do with Bean's joke of the day.
In what language would you write to a ghost? In Latin, it's a dead language.
Everyone loves a good doll, whether it's Scrum from Lilo and Stitch or Chucky from the Child's Play series. Today I have some fun little stories that, to be honest, I've had recorded since June, but the wind went out of my sails this summer. Well, better late than never. Please enjoy these spooky doll stories that you may have heard before, plus the story that inspired me to start this podcast. Just last week, I met a young man at an antique store. He was walking around with a My Buddy doll. It immediately caught my attention. Curious, I struck up a conversation with him. He explained that he had actually found the doll in another antique store on the same street and was completely astonished because it was his doll. He had donated it back in 2017. The doll had been his since he was about 2, and he knew it was his because of the little details. Like a pair of socks, it used to be his, and a hat on it, purchased from the Baby Gap, and the broken shoe that had snapped when his sister had tried to wear it. It's funny, isn't it, how small the world can be sometimes? Annabelle is the name given to an allegedly haunted Raggedy Ann doll. I'm sure you recognize the story from the Conjuring movies. Though the real doll doesn't have the same creepy factor in terms of her looks, her creepy backstory is at least partially based on fact. In 1968, a nursing student was given a Raggedy Ann doll by her mother. The daughter kept the doll on her bed. Every so often, she'd find the doll's position had changed, eventually evolving into moving around her room, then the whole apartment. The woman and her roommate started finding little notes written on old-fashioned parchment paper, written in red crayon as if scrawled by a child, saying, "Wanna play?" Some of her friends suggested the doll could be haunted, so they thought about trying to communicate with her, using a Ouija board. One night, that's what they did. They sat at the dining room table. Every seat was filled, and at the head of the table sat the doll. They opened the session, saying, "Is anyone there?" And the planchette moved slowly to yes. Then, one of them asked, "What's your name?" Again, the planchette moved around the board to spell out Annabelle. They continued to ask questions to get the full story, and they were told that the spirit in the doll was that of a little girl who died in their apartment and was lonely and just wanted someone to play with. So they told her she could stay so that she wouldn't be lonely anymore. For a while, everything was calm. Then notes started up again. This time, they had more ominous messages, like, "Help me," or "Miss me." The woman and her roommate were sick, tired, and weak all the time. They were getting scared that it might be Annabelle's doing, so they thought they'd look into getting some help. They asked around if anyone knew who could help them. It was 1968. Who were they going to call? Not the Ghostbusters. Ed and Lorraine Warren were well-known demonologists and researchers of the paranormal for at least 16 years at that point. They'd go on to investigate the Amityville house 7 years later. The Warrens were happy to help. When they arrived, Lorraine sensed a dark energy of something that wasn't ever human. They determined that the doll wasn't possessed by a little girl, as was originally thought. Lorraine said it was a demon out to take the energy and eventually the souls of the woman and her roommate. They decided it would be safer to take the doll and seal it away so no one could get hurt, or worse. They left with Annabelle and sat her in the back seat as if she were a child, complete with seatbelt. Despite being an almost brand new car, they had a lot of trouble getting their way home. First, it wouldn't start. Then, there's a lot of interference on the radio. Then, the accelerator got stuck, and Ed lost control of the car and drove off the road. Luckily, there were no serious harm to the Warrens or their car. But, while he was out examining the car, Ed almost got hit by a tractor trailer. When they were finally home, they called a priest friend to come over and bless the doll and the display case prison that they had made for the doll, complete with a sign on the glass door saying, "Positively do not open." The doll, still to this day, sits on display in the Warrens Occult Museum in Monroe, Connecticut. The Island of the Dolls. Don Julian Santana Barrera was born in 1921 in Mexico City. In the 1950s, he moved to an unnamed vacant island in the middle of a lake, L'Agua del Tesulio, to live a modest life, farming his own food. Not long after he moved in, he was at the edge of the water where he found the body of a young girl who presumably drowned, still clutching her doll. He was very religious and very superstitious. He buried the girl on the island and prayed over her. He tied her doll in a nearby tree to mark the grave. Soon after, whether it was his isolation or the spirit of the girl, Julian started to hear whispers in the night, as well as finding the doll on different trees from the original one where he had placed it. Trying to appease her spirit, when he went traveling to local communities to do trading or go to church, he would go through the garbage trying to find dolls, bringing them back and tying them to the trees, hoping to find some peace. And it worked, at least for a short while. Life returned to normal, and he went on his quiet farming life. Soon, started seeing dolls floating on the river, and the voices came back, this time specifically asking for her doll. So he started collecting more dolls, both from the river and local communities, hanging them on every available tree. Some people have joked that the spirit was so angry because of the deplorable conditions of the doll that he decorated the island with. There were some he found that were in better condition, and he built them a little house and made sure they stayed pretty. Rumors spread around in the nearby communities, and people, especially young ones, would try to sneak onto the island to see if it was really as creepy as the rumors said. Starting in the 1990s, Julian started letting people tour La Isla de las Muñecas, or the Island of the Doll. He used the money to supplement his income, making his life a little more comfortable. In 2001, about 50 years after finding the body of the little girl, Julian's body was found in almost the exact spot where he had found her. No one knows what happened to him, other than he drowned. Some people think he was actually possessed by an evil spirit or a demon, that he collected the dolls to appease evil rather than the little girl. There's still people that are too religious or too superstitious to visit the island. You can find some people willing to make a buck to take you to the island. Some people bring their own dolls to hang on the island to continue to appease the spirits and ward off evil in their own lives. It's estimated that there are well over 1,000 dolls now residing on the island. If you ever go to Mexico City, about an hour and a half south, you too can see the Island of the Dolls. Okiku the Doll. In 1918, a young man named Eikichi Suzuki was visiting Hokkaido, decided to buy a doll as a gift for his 2-year-old sister. The doll was a cute little girl that stands about 12 inches tall, was wearing a red and white kimono, looking like a kokeshi doll with short black bob hairstyle. When he got back home and gave the doll to his sister, she decided to name the doll after herself, Okiku. Unfortunately, she wouldn't be able to enjoy her doll for very long. Tragically, she died January 24th, 1919. They kept the doll on the family shrine and prayed over her every day until they moved to Sakhalin in 1938. They entrusted the doll to the Menenji Temple. The people that now watch over the doll say that they constantly have to maintain the doll's hair as it keeps growing. Despite the doll made with fake hair, they've had scientists test the hair, and it seems to be hair of a child. It gets washed annually and gets trimmed regularly. There are apparent videos proving her hair growing on the internet. Even now, more than 100 years later, you can go visit Okiku at the Menenji Temple. Its address is openly available on their wiki page. Robert the Doll. Robert the Doll is over 100 years old and is considered to be one of the most haunted dolls in the U.S. Robert is named after the boy that first owned him, the artist Robert Eugene Otto. Robert's grandparents gave him the doll in 1904 as a birthday gift and a souvenir from their trip to Germany. The doll was the lonely boy's only friend. He would play and talk to the doll as if he were a real living, breathing person. When the boy left the doll alone, he would sit him in the bedroom window so that he could spend time watching the world and not be so lonely or bored by himself. Robert kept his doll in his childhood home his whole life. When he went off to New York and Paris for school, he left his friend in the window, making sure he wouldn't be lonely with him gone so far for so long. The doll's room was in the attic, and the window faced the street. For long, rumors spread that people saw the doll move around, knowing that the grown-up Robert was far away at school. It would have been a cruel joke for his parents to play. When he was done with school, Robert returned to his home in Key West and married Annette Parker in 1930. They lived together in that house until he died in 1974, and she died 2 years later. During their time living there, it is said that you could hear footsteps like that of a child coming from the attic, and the house stood empty for 20 years. All of Annette and Robert's belongings, exactly where they had been placed by the couple, except Robert. He was still seen moving around in the attic till the house was bought in 1994. The new owners found the doll and told their friends, who in turn told them about the legend. They decided, for their safety and peace of mind, they'd donate Robert to the East Martello Museum, a museum that houses local art and history. You can visit Robert the doll today. If you want to take a picture of him, make sure you ask nicely first, or your luck may turn sour. The museum gets many letters saying that the doll caused car accidents, broken bones, job loss, divorce, and a cornucopia of other misfortunes. And museum visitors supposedly experience post-visit misfortunes for failing to respect Robert, is one case where it's better to ask permission than forgiveness. This story was featured on an episode of Stories with Sapphire back in December of 2023. It's actually what inspired me to make this podcast. And it goes like this. So 2020 was a weird year. Some people have been dealing with the quarantine better than others. I got to spend more time doing things with my kids, reconnecting with my witchy side of life. My nanny taught me what she knew before she died a few years back, before my son was born. Being so busy with work, family, and the rest of life usually getting in the way. But being stuck at home wasn't all bad. I became quite proficient at tarot. I even started a long-distance coven with a friend at the other end of the province. I guess we took social distancing to the extreme. My friend is one of the ones taking it harder. It brought up old feelings and emotions from their teen years. As a teen, they were very sick and had to be quarantined for 4 months. Myself and the rest of the friend group left alone to get rest and feel better. It wasn't until basically the end of it that doctors figured out what was even wrong. They ended up going down a dark spiral and dropped out of school. We were only in contact sporadically for a few years. When we got back in contact more, because I got an invitation to their wedding, I got to be a bridesmaid, and I gifted them with the cake. Since then, between us, we have 3 kids. They started a handmade goods small business and published a book. I started a cider brand with my partner. Life, well, seemed pretty good all around. We all have to deal with 2020. Like I said, my friend hasn't done so well. At first, I thought they were doing great. They were all kind of joking on Facebook about how everyone was acting like quarantine noobs. But over the next couple months, I noticed they slowly disappeared from social media, not even reacting to posts anymore. I began to send messages daily, just checking in. I knew what isolation had done to them in the past. I've also had my own fight with the demons of depression. They'd respond in a word or two, but not really conversing. But it was enough to know that they made it through those dark, lonely nights, and they saw the sun again. At one point, I got scared. I tried reaching out, and after a couple of days, I tried contacting their partner, and I was informed that the combination of mental health issues and chronic illness had sent them to the hospital. I felt helpless. It was at least a 6-hour drive, and I don't have a license. I mean, if I didn't have any responsibilities, I'd probably try riding a bike out there. I mean, it would only take a day or so. A thought came to me. I had a couple of dolls my friend had made us as a thank you for being part of the wedding. My kids have played with the dolls a number of times. One of them was especially roughly played with, and it happened to be the doll of my friend, and the head came loose. I figured if I was going to fix it anyway, maybe I could improve it a little. I took to one of my Facebook witchy groups that I was in, and asked if it would be possible to turn it into more of a magic doll version of them. Like a voodoo doll, but not voodoo, it being a close practice and all. Most people told me the same thing, that it's all about intent, and that my friend would want the help. So I sent them a message. I when I knew they were home, and asked if they'd like me to do it, and asked them to send me a lock of their hair to help focus their energy specifically. I could have used blood, but I thought that would be a little awkward to ask for them to mail. When I got the hair, I got out my little dollar store sewing kit and carefully placed the hair inside the body of the doll. Then carefully, I sewed the head back onto the body. As I did, I said a little poem, prayer, spell, call it what you will. I set my intentions for this to be a proxy for my friend, that we could spend time together. We could hug if we needed to. Hell, even binge TV together. Tried simple things at first, like when the family went for a walk in the woods behind our house. My little friend came along in the pocket of my hoodie. For quiet time when everyone else was asleep, I made a ball of popcorn and sat down to watch whatever I could find that sounded the least bit interesting. And when I found what to watch, I figured I'd invite my friend to join us and stream at their place and watch at the same time. I did so by sending a picture of the doll wrapped in a blanket on the couch next to a bowl of popcorn. They messaged me back that it was funny that at that moment they were given the sudden craving for popcorn. They suddenly could smell popcorn. Probably around the time I made mine. We watched a horror movie about a cursed piano or something like that. I got distracted by the conversation we were having. It was much more interesting. Things were great for a while, but then things got weird. I got busy with the Christmas rush. We had a lot more orders for cider as Christmas gifts, so we were working long hours, and I checked in when I could, but admittedly it wasn't more than maybe once a week, if that. One night, after coming home late enough that the kids were already in bed, I showered and was about to lie down when I heard crying. First I thought, great, the rattling of the pipes cooling in this old house woke the kids. Put on my bathrobe, and I went to check on the kids. Let my partner sleep. They fell asleep as soon as their head hit the pillow. I got about halfway down the hall to my kids' room when I realized that wasn't the direction the crying was coming from. My next thought, maybe one of the kids got up to sneak a midnight snack and didn't turn on the lights to get our attention, and tripped or stubbed their toe or something. So I headed towards the kitchen, turned on the lights saying, you could have come to get me if you needed a snack or something. That's when I realized the room was empty. I noticed the crying was louder, but not in here, in the living room, the next room over. I followed the sound and turned on my lamp to see better. I didn't recognize this crying as that of my children, now hearing it louder. I followed it to my fireplace. I thought maybe something had gotten stuck. Small animals like cats can make human sounds. I went back into the kitchen and got a flashlight out of our junk drawer. Batteries were kind of low, so it was a bit dim and flickery. But as soon as I looked up my chimney, I opened the flue and nothing but night sky. As I stood up, it didn't make sense that it was actually At first it didn't make sense what it actually was. First I thought maybe I was asleep and dreaming. I know now I wasn't. The doll of my dear friend was sitting on the mantel and very clearly crying. I picked it up and hugged it and started to cry. Then I worried. They must be feeling really bad for this to happen. So, still holding the doll, cuddling it really, I ran and got my phone and dialed their number. Rang and rang and rang. Then finally, voicemail. I hung up and tried again. I hung up and tried again and again and again. Feeling almost defeated, I thought of their partner. I didn't have their phone number, so I tried calling through Facebook Messenger. Hello? A very sleepy voice answered. Hey, it's Sam. Is everything all right? I replied. Oh, yeah, well, I guess. I mean, we're all asleep. Are you sure everyone is asleep? Yeah, well, I think so. To help protect the family since I work in public, I've been sleeping in the basement since quarantine started. They've already dealt with me so much medically. They've already dealt with so much medically. They don't need this too. Can you please do me a favor? Call it a hunch. Please go check on your partner. They aren't answering the phone. There was no worded response, but I could hear the footsteps and breathing as they traveled up the 3 floors. Then, doorknobs rattling, but not opening, and what I assume is the phone dropping and banging as they try to open the door. Then, the same crying I was hearing from the doll. The phone was picked up again. Thank you for calling, Sam. I need to hang up and call an ambulance. They won't answer me, and they've scratched through the skin on their arms. I'll update you later. Turns out, they hadn't been sleeping, and, well, no one's quite sure what happened. My best guess is their demons caught up with them. They're being treated now, and go to therapy at least once a week. I've since gotten my kids to treat the doll like a sibling. We even set a spot for them at the table. Now here's where the story can go in 2 ways. The way I originally ended it, and the way that Sapphire ended it. Honestly, I think hers is better. My ending. I know it's not my job to make other people happy. Happiness is nice, but not always necessary. Health is more important. Look after yourselves and check on your friends. Sometime you might just save a life. Now for Sapphire's ending, it starts the same. Oof, does it turn. I know it's not my job to make other people happy. I'm really glad that this doll was helping in such an immense way. Which brings me to where I am now. I was awoken by an unfamiliar sound at the foot of my bed. I groggily turned on my bedroom light and saw the cat surrounded by bits of fabric. She was tearing through the doll, nibbling on the herbs I had placed inside. It was completely unrecognizable. I can't move. What have I done to Jamie? I'm still sitting here, too petrified to call them up. The end. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Haunted Book Club podcast. If you listen closely, you can already hear the echoes of the next story. Sweet dreams.